Every hero has 15 signature cards, and one of them's the worst, and that's what we're talking about today. So I'm Villain Theory, and I'm here with Boomguy, and we're starting a new series where we're saying nice things about these quote-unquote worst cards. We're starting off with the core set, going through each hero. We have to agree on what we think is the worst card, and then we'll kind of try and rank them afterwards. So it's going to be pretty interesting. So how you doing, Boomguy, and where can people find you?
I'm so good. Thanks for having me, Villain Theory. I am the host of the Winning Hand podcast, which is all about Marvel Champions. If you're into Marvel Champions, I assume you are because you're watching this video and this channel. You can check us out on YouTube or wherever you find podcasts. We are Winning Hand Podcast.
It is a really good podcast. I really enjoy it. And in fact, I am on one episode somewhere. You can maybe hunt that down, but all the episodes are really good. What have you been covering on there at the moment?
Well, this month we are doing a deep dive on my personal favorite hero and character in the game, Vision, where we are talking about one different card in his kit every week. So there's going to be 4 episodes to kind of talk about the character holistically and what we think about him and what we think about his cards.
That's very cool. Vision, not my favorite, but your favorite. So that's going to be a really fascinating listen. That's very interesting. And yeah, I think we should just get into this. I think we should just pick a hero, start talking about which card we think is worst. And I'm going to pick first. I'm going to pick Spider-Man as our first character. I'm going to keep it very simple. Core set, first hero most people play. And I think we'll do this in a way that I reveal the card, you reveal the card, and then we can kind of talk about it, see if it matches up. So Spider-Man is really interesting. He has a lot of really good cards, and it was quite difficult for me to choose this in some way, but I got it down to 2, and the one I have chosen is going to be Webbed Up. What about you, Boomguy? What do you think for Spider-Man?
It's an interesting choice. I actually chose Spider Tracer as his worst card. So why don't you say a few words about why you think Webbed Up is the worst, and I'll say a little bit about why I think Spider Tracer is the worst, and we'll see who convinces whom, and then we'll throw it on the ranker.
Yeah, these were the 2 cards I was actually torn between, so that's really interesting that you've gone for the other one. So for me, the problem with Webbed Up is it's too expensive for what it does, but also Spider-Man draws a card whenever he's attacked. So in solo play specifically, but this is also a problem at any player count. Obviously the more players there are, the less likely Webbed Up is going to be to, block an attack for you. But Webbed Up says forced interrupt. When attached enemy would attack, discard Webbed Up, then stun the enemy. So this prevents 2 attacks. If I'm in solo, Spider-Man is now not drawing 2 cards while this is being used. So I feel like the actual cost of this card goes from already, in my opinion, slightly expensive, that full cost for what it does, to extremely expensive. And that is my kind of main point with it. It's just, I like what it does, but I don't want to pay that much, and I want to keep drawing cards.
All right, well, I went for Spider Tracer, and for me, the issue with Spider Tracer is that's his primary way of thwarting. He only has 1 thwart natively on his hero card, and he doesn't have any other way to thwart. And while it is an okay way to thwart and attachments and upgrades on minions are getting more popular in the game, the fact that there's multiple steps you have to go through makes it very difficult to rely on. So it is 3 thwart after defeating a minion, which feels great. You defeat the minion and then it goes away, but you have to have one. If there isn't a minion, he just doesn't have a way to thwart. So that's not great. It doesn't synergize with anything else that Parker wants to do. Like nothing else in his kit cares about minions. It's not Thor, for example. So that's difficult.
Yeah, I think I agree with everything you're saying there. Now, it's a 1-cost card that can remove 3 threat. In my head, that's really good. But no minion, it's useless. It's completely dead. And I think Spider-Man has that problem with a couple of cards. Like Enhanced Spider Sense is an absolute, this is an incredible card. But if there's no treachery, you can't use it. But at least there are quite often that treacheries are more common than minions in most scenarios, I'm gonna say. Don't check me on that, but yeah, Spider Tracer is so difficult. I think the reason I kind of leaned more to Webbed Up than Spider Tracer was that Spider-Man desperately needs thwarting, and I kind of feel like he would rather have Spider Tracer in his kit than Webbed Up. That was my kind of logic there. But definitely Spider Tracer is very situational, whereas at least Webbed Up, you can put it out there whenever.
I think Webbed Up synergizes really well with a multiplayer game and with what Spider-Man wants to do, which is defending and protecting. So like you said, you don't get the card draw, but in a 3-player game, for example, Webbed Up might hit the other 2 players, and you might still get the card draw, but you defended the table, which kind of feels like what he wants to do. As opposed to Spider Tracer in a multiplayer game or a single player game, I'm not really sure how viable it is. It there's more likely to be minions if you have a multiplayer game, but there still might not be any, or someone else might have already taken care of them, in which case that's just dead.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely think it depends. Definitely they are both better in multiplayer, which is really interesting, and both a lot less appealing in solo play. Now, I kind of feel like Webbed Up is worse, but you probably feel like Spider Tracer is worse. How do you feel about this? You know, my last point about Webbed Up is in a smaller player count game, potentially, or definitely in a solo game, is Webbed Up will prevent you from using backflip. If you got backflip into your hand, but their enemy is webbed up, now you can't get that value out of a backflip.
I feel like he's a very reactive hero. Most of his cards do something in reaction to something else. So reacting, webbed up, spider tracer, enhanced spider sense, backup, all of them are reactive. If you put webbed up out, it frees you up to think about the game more proactively. So if you're playing solo, for example, you put webbed up out, that means you have 2 turns where you don't draw a card, but it also means it's 2 turns you don't have to spend a card defending or use your basic defense. So you can focus on other stuff you want to do and start progressing the game on your terms a little bit more.
Yeah. I agree with everything you're saying, but it is the cost for me. It is that
Yeah.
4 cost upgrade. You know, if I've got 5 cards in hand, that's my entire hand gone. But I'm not drawing 2 cards. I feel like it's taken 7 cards to do that, and I don't know if
Yeah.
that kind of breathing room is. It
I
doesn't.
will relent. I'll give in and I'll say, let's make webbed up the card and let's throw it on the tier maker.
Okay. Yeah. Spider Tracer and I definitely think we got the worst two there. I'd be curious for you guys in the comments if you agree or disagree with our picks. I'd be curious to hear about it, get involved. But let's go for Webbed Up. So Spider-Man, we have Webbed Up as his worst card. So Boomguy, do you want to choose a different hero to go to?
I will choose next, and my choice is going to be Black Panther.
Ooh. First character I ever played in this game.
Really? I feel like that's not most people.
Yeah, my friend introduced me and he was like, these are what these characters do. And I was like, triggering upgrades sounds fun. Yeah, let's do it.
Well, okay. So the card I chose, before I say anything about it, I'll just say the card is Ancestral Knowledge. That's my
Interesting
choice.
choice. Well, I'm going to tell you mine, and mine is also ancestral knowledge, and I'm pretty glad we agreed on one of these. So
Yeah.
yeah, you said it first. Why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit why you think this is his least good card?
Okay. We'll talk about why I think it's his worst card, and then when we put on the tier maker, then we can kind of pivot and say something nice about it.
Yeah,
So first off, paying 1 to shuffle cards into your deck doesn't feel great. There's a lot of heroes nowadays that just do that for free. In the core set, that was maybe not the case, so I understand. But that doesn't feel awesome when other heroes just do this natively. Like, this is just War Machine's ability, but you have to pay 2 cards to do it.
yeah,
It also forces him to flip to Alter Ego to use it, which means I'm always a little skeptical of events that are Alter Ego actions because timing is really awkward in a way to line it up. Like, if you aren't flipping down, because you have to decide where you end your turn before you draw up your hand size. So, if you draw this into your hand and you're in hero form, that means next turn you'll have to flip down at the end of your turn and then shuffle cards in. But it means you have to flip, and if you are in alter ego form and you don't draw this card, then you don't have it. And I think the last point I'll make is it has to be 3 different cards. So you can't reshuffle 3 Wakanda Forevers. You have to pick 3 different cards to reshuffle in,
yeah.
and that makes it tough.
Yeah, this is crazy to me. When I did play Black Panther, early on, I played my first few games of Marvel Champions with him. Actually, I definitely put 3 Wakanda Forevers back into my deck, and the reason for this, and I'm gonna defend this slightly, is that the Wakanda Forevers they have different resource icons. They are not the same
Mm.
card to me, right? But I think it goes by the wording, by the name, by the title of the card. So unfortunately, for Ancestral Knowledge, you are limited to putting your only one of your best cards back into your deck. Really, I would say Wakanda Forever. If you're playing Black Panther, that is the card you want. Uh, I can completely agree on the timing of Alter Ego. He does have that really good Alter Ego support, but maybe it's not in play. Maybe the state of the game won't allow that. And yeah, it's just kind of awkward to pay 2 resources and have absolutely nothing happen until you start drawing cards and then try and make up the value that way. Because especially in the modern game, it's very tight on deck space. Every card you put in is chosen carefully, and pretty much every card is going to be good. So not all cards are equal. There's definitely advantages to putting specific cards back, but do I want to pay a 4A1 cost event? No, not really.
Yeah, I think If he was a modern hero, if he was released in waves 6, 7, 8, it would probably be a one cost event that just shuffled all copies of Wakanda Forever into your deck. And if that's what it was, I think it would be a lot better. Um,
Yeah, that'd be
but
amazing.
it's not what it is. Yeah.
So yeah, no, we agree on that one. I think that's a pretty kind of good choice. Kind of honestly, Black Panther has a lot of really good cards. There's not a lot else that I think was really in contention for me personally. I would say my second
No.
worst maybe Energy Daggers. Just throw that out there. But
Interesting choice.
it's tough. I like all of these, and I do like Energy Daggers.
Yeah, his upgrades are all good.
Yeah. Let's go to a different hero. Let's go to. I'm just going for the one above here on Hall of Heroes that I'm using here. Let's go to Iron Man. I think Iron Man will be an interesting one to talk about. And I'm going to just predict we'll agree on this one as well. So I'll throw it out there.
Mhm.
For me, my worst card for Iron Man is going to be War Machine.
War Machine. I picked War Machine. Yeah.
Nice.
So
Yeah.
tell us, what don't you like about War Machine? Why is this his worst card?
Well, let's look at War Machine. I mean, I could say something positive now. I mean, the art is of War Machine, so this is good. Um, other than that, he's very slow to pay off if you're just relying on his stats. It's 4 cost for 4 HP, but he's only got 2 attack. You know, it's not the worst, but for a signature ally, his just, his action makes him take 2 damage to deal 1 damage to each enemy. This is good against Ultron. This is pretty much not good anywhere else. It is very, very costly to play this guy and then use half his health up just to, ping everyone a little bit. It's, Squirrel Girl can keep her job as, hitting each enemy.
Yeah, I think 5 effective resources for any ally is a tough ask. We talked about webbed up earlier. It's the same thing. Anything that costs 4 means it's probably just about your whole turn. That's tough. His ability is just a worse Squirrel Girl, and he only has 1 thwart, which is also bad for a signature ally. I just, outside of Ultron, like you said, I'm really not sure where this fit. The other thing I'll say is it feels very disconnected from Tony's kit. So it doesn't do anything that Tony can't do himself or needs someone else to do. Tony has plenty of ping damage in his kit. So he feels disconnected, whereas everything else in Tony's kit feels very synergistic. It all works together towards a purpose. This feels like an outlier.
Yeah, I'd 100% agree. And I'd even take that slightly further, not just about his kit, but about his traits, because the War Machine basic ally has the Avenger and Shield trait, but this War Machine ally doesn't even have the Avenger trait if you're trying to do anything in leadership or, Earth Smiter's heroes, which is, not necessarily common with Iron Man, but it's definitely less common, if your signature ally doesn't even work with those kind of things. So, yeah, War Machine, not my favorite card for Iron Man, who I think also has quite a lot of very good cards.
Yeah, Iron Man has a lot of really good cards. This was not a difficult choice, I will say. This was pretty easy.
Yeah.
This might have been the easiest one of the core set, if I'm going to spoil that. I think
I'll agree.
choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where to next? What hero? What are you feeling?
Well, there's 2 left. I think I'm going to leave you with the big green machine, and I'm going to choose Captain Marvel.
Okay. I'm going to tell you
Captain
now,
Marvel,
I struggled.
You did.
Yeah.
I struggled a little bit as well. It maybe not as much as some of the other heroes, but this one, I think for me, it's Crisis Interdiction.
It was in contention for me. I'm still honestly at this point in time not even sure what I'm going to choose here. Let's
Wow, okay.
Yeah. You know what?
Do you want to choose first or do you want me to make my case?
You know what? I feel like I'm so between 3 different cards here. If you feel it's this one, I'm probably going to cave into this one. My other considerations were the helmet and Cosmic Flight. So Cosmic Flight gives you aerial, but it's very expensive for what it does to block damage. The helmet gives her defense, and she doesn't really want to defend. But I mean, getting up to 3 defense is nice, but you have to have Cosmic Flight out. But then looking at Crisis Interdiction, and you can talk about this one, why don't we like this card?
Well, 3 effective resources for 2 thwart is a bad return on any card. For a hero card, which are generally better, it's even worse. So that's not good. The aerial trait, as you just talked about, relies on another card that's also not great and maybe overcosted. So you're not guaranteed to hit the kicker unless you're building for it. I haven't seen a lot of decks are built around the aerial trait for Carol, so I don't think that's happening a lot because it's a core set. Aerial was not really a thing. Tony can get it. Carol can get it, but it's like you have to jump through hoops to get it. Um, so if you're paying 3 for 2, it's not great. If you're paying 3 for 4 that requires another card to get there, it's still not very good.
Mhm.
And she has 3 copies of it, which
Yeah.
hurts.
Yeah, this, I mean, I agree with everything you just said there. You have to set up another card to use this, but on its own, that card isn't very good either. But at least, it can block some damage fairly okay. I mean, threat removal is important, but I think what stings about this card is there's a little card in Justice called Multitasking, which is just a better version of this without any setup required. So yeah, Crisis Interdiction is not a good look for Captain Marvel.
I mean, for Justice is better too. Like
Yeah.
multitasking, but for Justice, it only hits one scheme. But we're not at the part where we're saying good things about these cards yet. I'm just giving why I think it's bad.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. Definitely, we'll look in Crisis Interdiction for Captain Marvel. It's so
All right.
interesting. I think Captain Marvel's a very strong hero, but definitely her cards, there's a couple of flaws in there. It's interesting.
I think she is very strong as a hero, but
Mm,
most of that comes from what is on her hero card. I think there's a couple of stinkers in that deck, as you just mentioned.
yeah. Okay, well, that leaves us with She-Hulk.
Mm,
And you know what? There's a couple of contenders for her as well, although I have made my decision.
okay.
And still pretty close between the two, so I'll be interested to see if you go for a different one. I feel like I could cave fairly easily here, Poor She-Hulk. But she has improved a lot since the course there, and she is very, very fun. But what is maybe not so fun is legal practice. This card,
Mm.
yeah. Tell me what your card choice is here.
So legal practice was a finalist for me, but I went for ground stomp.
Ah, the other one I was looking at, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. Well,
I mean, at least she is the best Hulk, but go on.
I'll agree with that. I mean, although I might make an argument for the ally versions. So,
Yeah.
best hero Hulk. I'm gonna say because I sort of accidentally went first talking about the Captain Marvel cards. Do you want to tell me about Groundstorm?
Sure, ground stomp. Well, very similar to War Machine, a card that damages everybody is great against Ultron, but 3 effective resources to deal 1 damage to enemies is essentially a worse Squirrel Girl, just straight up a worse Squirrel Girl.
Yeah, it's a Squirrel Girl without the Squirrel Girl.
It's a Squirrel Girl that costs the same, but then also doesn't get a block and also doesn't give you a thwart or another attack if you need it. This is basically only useful against Ultron, and outside of that scenario, I would struggle to think of another time that you would actually play this. So I just think this is not good.
Yeah, it's I wouldn't say there's never a time you would use it. There are some kind of ways you could use it, but I'm not saying nice stuff about it now. I'm saying bad stuff. So
Hmm.
yeah, no, I mean I 100% agree with everything. 1 damage to each enemy needed lots and lots of enemies, and there's just not that common to have enough to make this really, really valuable, especially over her other cards and other aspect cards you can put it in. It is just kind of rough. I'm going to talk about legal practice a little bit here. Although
Mm.
you made convincing arguments, but this card might be the worst sort of efficiency for thwarting in the game for threat removal. So 0 cost event, order your action, choose and discard up to 5 cards, remove 1 threat from a scheme for each card discarded. So if I ditch 5 cards, and I've also played legal practice, so that's 6 cards gone from my hand, I've removed 5 threat. That's less than a 1-to-1 ratio, which is terrible on a character like She-Hulk, who's one of her main weaknesses, I would say, apart from threat removal, as we're seeing here, is, she doesn't necessarily, she lacks a bit of money. She's, a lower hand size in hero form, so if you flip down with this, you might not even be able to fulfill the entire thing. Focus Rage can give you cards, but it's just a lot of cards gone, basically, to do something very, very inefficient.
Well, I don't disagree with any of that. What I will say for why I didn't choose it, I so I'll say something nice about it. I think she's a hero that wants to flip a lot,
Yeah.
and she's probably the original want to flip a lot hero, right? You want to get those bonuses from flipping back and forth. Thwarting in Alter Ego is very rare, even in Wave 8 where we're at now. It is still very uncommon to be able to thwart very much in Alter Ego. So to have that right out of the gate is not terrible. So I think she doesn't have a lot of thwart anyway. There are times where you're going to draw bad cards in your hand. like Ground Stomp. And maybe the best thing is to flip down, take advantage of the flip action that she gets. Then you can pitch Legal Practice and Ground Stomp, and you at least remove some threat. I don't. I. It was tough, but I think it's more useful than Ground Stomp.
It's interesting because in my head, I still think legal practice may be worse. But going back to the Spider-Man at the start of this video, one of my points for not choosing Spider Tracer as his worst card is because he has one forwarding. He kind of wants forwarding in a lot of cases. Even in two-player with someone else, it's still nice to be able to contribute something. And I think it's the same with She-Hulk. She has that one printed forward that. Ground Stomp, I don't think she really needs it. It's just, she has plenty of damage. Legal Practice, it is, nice that it is forwarding, so I guess that's what she needs. So I will cave in. I will say Ground Stomp, I will agree, is her worst card.
All right. Well, then we are into the space where we need to put these on the tier maker. Time to rank them all. And this is the best part because now we get to say nice things. So we've chosen the card. Now we're going to talk about why they're good and why they should be higher on the tier list because there is going to be a worst of the worst eventually.
Oh, yeah. But I like that even in trying to say bad things about them, we have said a couple of nice things here and there. So, there's hope for any card. But yeah, let's go ahead and do that. So here we are ready to rank these cards. And we're going to primarily be trying to say nice things about these cards to move them up the list. And I'm excited for this. I've got no idea where to start for this. And Boomguy, I think we should share. This was actually your idea for the most part. So where would you like to start? Do you want to pick a card and slap it somewhere on this list just to get us on the ball rolling?
Yeah. Well, let's just go in the order we talked about, maybe. That might be easiest. So the first one we had was Webbed Up, and we kind of agreed on it. So let's put it. All right. So if I was going to rank it, I would put it like right in the middle. I think it's like a B. It's right in the middle. And it's going to move up and down as we add other cards to this through the next waves. But I'm really excited mostly to say nice things about these cards. So Webbed Up is the one that you originally brought that I agreed with. So why don't you tell us why you think it's really good? So now we talked about why it's the worst one in their kit, but now we're transitioning and this is the part I'm really excited about.
Yeah, well, I actually think we covered some of the good stuff already, which is, good. We can say nice things about these, quote unquote. I'm not going to say worst anymore. I'm going to say least good cards. And like you say in multiplayer, the timing can, I think maybe be nice at it as well. Like the timing can line up that it will never prevent you from drawing a card with your Spider-Man, spider sensibility. So you could just not get that big negative at all in the right situation. And it might not line up that way, but it can do. And I also think what you said made a lot of sense as well. If your defense is completely covered, you can be more flexible with like your hero activating, basic attacking, whatever you want to do with it. So I do think it opens up opportunities, and in the right settings, it kind of doesn't have a drawback. And the final thing I would say about it is because it blocks an activation, well, two activations, you can use this on someone like Loki, if he's not, in Star Wars form, to block two of his, attacks or something. And what that means is two less activations of the Infinity Gauntlet, or on Magneto, and it's two less magnet counters. So on those specific villains, actually, Webbed Up becomes very desirable.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit on something that I wanted to touch on is that this gets around Stalwart. So you don't get the second one maybe, but for some of those that hit really hard and you're playing a solo or a two-player game and you just need a break, this gives you a break. It's expensive, but it gets around Stalwart. So if you just need to not activate for whatever reason, but because you can't take another huge attack or because you don't want the Infinity Gauntlet to activate or whatever, this gives you that break. I also think thematically, it's just really cool. Like this feels like Spider-Man. I feel like I'm webbing somebody up. That's just a cool thing. So while it's expensive and I don't want to dwell on that negative, I do think it has great thematics and it allows you to help defend the table. That this allows you to like ignore the villain for 2 turns in solo and just say like, okay, now I can focus on playing my Thor cards or dealing my damage or managing the side scheme that I need to or whatever and not have to worry about it. I think it's good.
Yeah, I like this B tier placement as well. I could actually see this staying here for the long time in a way because this is a card I will occasionally play, which is more than I can say for a couple of the cards I'm looking at here on this list. And there are cards I know on future characters who, almost like their worst card, still a pretty good card. So I'm thinking A and S, it's probably going to be reserved for those at least. So this is like, it's playable, but I don't want to play it that often. It's kind of what I'm feeling for this one. And I think B is a good area for that. And
Agreed.
I'm pretty happy with that. So next up, we discussed, I believe you went to Black Panther.
Yeah. Well, why don't you grab Black Panther's ancestral knowledge, and what do you think? I placed the first one.
I'm torn between C and D. I think there are worse cards than it. And in the right situation, I'm already saying good things about it. I'm going to put it in C tier. It's definitely worse, I think, than Webbed Up because Ancestral Knowledge for me, I'm barely ever playing it. I'm only playing this if it's the only thing I can do. And there is some good stuff. What I like about this is if my deck is almost empty, I can almost pick 3 cards I'm going to get on the next turn, which is very, very powerful. So that is something I really enjoy using it for. It gives you that kind of control. And, not all cards are made equal. Putting powerful cards back into your deck does have some added value. So it's 2 effective, resources, 1 cost card to play it. But by getting cards that maybe punch a bit above their weight back into your deck, it can actually do you a lot of favors.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think it costs a bit much for what you get. But for a hero who's generally pretty resource rich and has a lot of things to spend stuff on, that's maybe not the worst. You are allowed to shuffle in 3 different cards. So you could use Wakanda Forever. You could put in his Vibranium, the double resource card, which is great. Tons of event cards. Or if you don't have all your upgrades out, you can shuffle Shuri in so you can get those upgrades out quicker. I think that's really great. It gives you a reason to go to Alter Ego, and you can take advantage of Golden City, which is a really, really good card.
Oh, yeah.
And if you're already down and you draw it, it's amazing because you're going to get that Golden City after you shuffle things in. You might draw them before you flip up. So I definitely agree with the placement. I think it's worse than Webbed Up if I'm comparing it directly. I can think of at least one of this group that I never play that will be worse, but Ancestral Knowledge is not great, but I think C tier. I think I could see it floating towards the bottom of C tier, to be honest, as more cards get added, but I don't think it'll go down a level.
Okay. So far, we both agree on where we put these. We're being very civil. I'm curious if that's going to change. So next, I believe we went to Iron Man, made by my amazing decision to scroll up. And there he was.
Yeah.
So Iron Man, we have the War Machine card. The first ally, but so far, I think we've had... we had an event, we've had an upgrade. The first ally on our little tier list here. Where do you think War Machine belongs?
I think War Machine is a D tier. I don't think. Well, now that you put him out, you hover him over S. No. I think he's at the very bottom. This is the worst one of these 5, I think. But we are in the section now where we say good things about it. Okay, so I will say that. Well, Tony has a pretty high thwart capability generally. If you're not talking about his suit, his hero card is pretty good thwart. He doesn't have a ton of damage, so this can help with damage. If you don't use his card ability, he's 4 costs, he's 2 damage, 2 attack, with only 1 consequential. So that's in line with a lot of other signature allies that cost 4, like Winter Soldier and Rogue, who also have 2 attack and only 1 consequential. So right there, he's fine. He's got 4 hit points, so you can trigger that quite a bit. That's quite a bit of damage. Tony also only has 9 hit points. So he needs all the defense he can get. So after you activate that a couple times, you then have a chump blocker, which is great. I do love the art. I think you mentioned that when we were first talking about the bad part. I love the art on this card. It's quite good, which I can say is better than some of the other art on his cards. So overall, there are some nice things I can say about it, but unfortunately it ends up at the bottom for me.
Yeah, so trying to stick to the nice things. I do think if you attack 3 times and then block with War Machine, he's actually, fairly efficient. It's not the worst. It's actually, if I could math out that value specifically and guarantee getting it like that, yeah, I'd go for it. But it's just so slow over, several turns. And it's very expensive. And he has a lot of other things he really wants to do. Like you said earlier, it doesn't really fit into his kit. But I'm going more to the negative now. To the positive. This is a difficult one.
Keep it positive.
I do think his action has some other uses. Before we recorded this, I was actually playing a game against Magog here, and he brought in the sci-fi set of minions and things. And what happened is we ended up with like 4 minions on the board that all had tough. If I had War Machine, I would have used this action here. I would have called out that squirrel girl in him and tried to clear those stuff. So I think that would have been really efficient, more efficient than what I ended up having to do, which was try and ping them off individually kind of thing. So there are situations, maybe a little bit niche, where you can have lots of toughs to ping off, or sometimes the board is just suddenly flooded, and hey, maybe 1 damage everywhere, kind of nice. So
Yeah.
there are uses. He's just, out of all Iron Man's pretty good cards, not reaching for this one so often, but he does have uses. Stay positive.
Yeah, stay positive. I wish his attack had piercing. That would almost be better than the ability that he has. But there are some niche cases where you would use it. The same ones I think you use Squirrel Girl for. I have definitely played this card on occasion. I played against a Master Mold not that long ago, and this card was useful because there's a lot of really beefy ally or beefy minions that come out, and they have tough sometimes, and that helps you ping them off to free up your big attacks, so you don't waste them on tough cards. So it has some utility, but it's at the bottom for me.
And it has that shield trait if you're playing a shield deck.
True.
But I think we
And the
should move
soldier
on.
trait.
The
Yeah,
soldier
let's go.
trait, in case you're,
For no reason at all.
yeah, for reasons. Um, we went to Captain Marvel next, and we picked Crisis Interdiction, which was your choice that well, I didn't really end up picking one. That kind of caved in before I made my case.
Yeah, I
Um,
convinced you pretty easy.
yeah. So Crisis Interdiction, this is an interesting one because I will be honest, I play Crisis Interdiction more than I play Webbed Up. Um, but at the same time, on Captain Marvel, I can play a ridiculous amount of cards. Sometimes, it might just turn out that way. It's not necessarily better. So I'm finding this hard to rank. I could see it anywhere between D and B tier. And I think in my head, the smoothest thing to do then would be to put it at C tier because threat removal is threat removal. If you can set up the aerial, it can hit these different schemes that can be useful. And for threat removal for a 2-cost card, there's a lot of characters who would really appreciate that. Characters we haven't talked about maybe yet in this episode, although She-Hulk would probably enjoy having a card that could, if she had aerial, remove full threat. So I'm gonna tentatively put it in C tier. How do you feel about this?
I think that's probably where it belongs. My first instinct when you mentioned that you play it more than Webbed Up, immediately I thought that, well, I wish if Peter had that card, he would play it quite a bit, even though it's below the curve. And if Carol had Webbed Up, she would play that quite a bit because she doesn't have very good defense. Unfortunately, that's not how it shook out. I think where you put it is probably right. I think I probably play it compared to ancestral knowledge. Would you put it ahead or below? I think that's where I'm struggling.
It's really not a huge amount of difference. I do think I play Crisis Interdiction more than
I
Ancestral, but
agree.
she does have 3 copies of it though, so there's that kind of
I
aspect.
think I play it more as an energy resource than I play it for its
Oh,
actual ability.
yeah. I'm just tentative. I do think I. You know what? I'm going to leave it like this. I think Ancestral does have those really interesting uses where the end of your deck or something, or you're drawing cards with Golden City. You can kind of get some kind of control over it and get some really kind of nice use. So, yeah, I'm gonna
Mhm.
stick with this.
I agree. And it's a little more unique than Crisis Interdiction, which you have 3
Yes.
copies of and also just feels like kind of by the numbers, pay this to remove this threat. Whereas Ancestral Knowledge is a little more interesting.
Yeah, I would say Ancestral Knowledge here, probably the most interesting of the cards we've looked at. It's very unique, as you say. Webbed Up, really, really thematic, probably the most thematic, and Crisis just can't find any of those, sort of, subcategories to really
But
kind
we're
of redeem
saying nice
itself.
things, Villain Theory. We're saying nice
I
things.
said nice
So
things.
tell us why it's good.
I said nice things about Ancestral Knowledge and Webbed Up. uh, Crisis Interdiction has striking art. There we go.
Does have good art. It's if you hit the kicker, it's very much in line with For Justice.
Yeah,
3 effective resources for 4th thwart. It's
yeah,
in line with For Justice, and you can split it up. So, it's not terrible. For Justice also has a kicker. Same with multitasking, like you mentioned. So all of these cards require some build around. They don't just happen.
yeah,
Being able to split it up is useful. I think that's nice. And if you're not playing her in Justice, it is a reliable way to thwart.
yeah.
So, and it's an energy resource which she cares about sometimes. So I think it has uses.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. And I think we're pretty much agreed on that one. So I think that leaves us with the final heroes, quote unquote, West, the least good card. So we've got Ground Stomp for She-Hulk. What are you feeling for this one?
I think Ground Stomp for me, if I was, oh boy, that's tough because I think it is above. War Machine, but I think I'm gonna put it on D tier. I
Okay.
think that's where it ends up for me. And I think to me that feels right. I think it's a card that is difficult to play for a hero that doesn't struggle for damage and it doesn't offer anything else. That's kind of where I think it ends.
I need nice things.
But
Why is it better
we're
than War
saying
Machine?
we're saying nice things. Why is it better than War Machine? Well, I think it is a mental resource, so it's easy fodder for Superhuman Law Division, which you can use that.
Yep.
It can be used to ping tough cards. So we mentioned a character who doesn't struggle for damage, but she has a lot of big attacks, and I don't want to waste those on a tough card. So this can ping tough cards. In those cases, the same we mentioned with War Machine. If the board's overwhelmed suddenly, there's a lot of, or if you're playing Ultron, or if there's a lot of tough cards, it does take care of those at a fairly cheap rate, 2. And
Yep.
yeah, the biggest thing for me is it doesn't waste her big attacks. So if you're building up for a huge attack, it doesn't waste those on a tough card. So I think it has uses.
Yeah, I'm of two minds whether I think this is better or worse than War Machine, but I will say it's definitely a D tier card in this in this realm of cards we're talking about here, because let's say nice things about it. I don't think we need to make an E tier because, like you say, it can ping off toughs and little things like that. And it's actually not an attack either. So if you maybe need to do a little something and you're stunned, it will bypass that. And it has a superpower trait. We all love the superpower trait with Death Focus, which means you can get that little bit of a discount to kind of ping that damage out across the board. And we've just got a new multi-villain scenario with 4 horsemen. You can get a lot of hounds out that don't have much health. There's a world where that could hit on a 4-player game. It could easily potentially hit maybe 7 or 8 characters. I don't think that's entirely impossible. So in that light, maybe you could get something fairly worthwhile out of it. So not my favorite card by any means, but I do like it. And I think I prefer War Machine in a vacuum. Let's say these were aspect cards and I was deck building,
Hmm.
just the flexibility of an ally. But within their respective hero kits, I'm thinking I do play ground stomp sometimes because 4 hand size, you got to make do with what you have. But I feel like I'm happier when I play War Machine compared to ground stomp. So actually, no,
So you
I
would
think I'm
move it
gonna.
down?
I think I talked myself into moving it down. How do you feel about
I think you talked me into moving it down as well. The more I think about it, the flexibility of an ally is just better, even though it's a very expensive ally. Tony can sometimes have a really big hand size, right? He
Yeah,
builds up his
7.
tech and he can have a lot of cards. So it maybe isn't your whole turn. Yep. I think I also agree with you. Ground Stomp is the worst of these.
But I'm just saying War Machine is more flexible. Ground Stomp, you can ping off lots of toughs if they're on the board. That's all I've got.
And I think it's important for people to remember, we're talking about these cards from the perspective of Wave 8, right? Age of Apocalypse, the
Yes.
final X-Men wave. We're looking back at these cards that came out 5+ years ago now. If you're looking at this in the context of a core set, if you just picked up the game and you grabbed a core set, I think many of them fare substantially better and might see more play than they do now.
Yes,
So
definitely.
they're definitely, I feel like some of these cards are built specifically around the core set scenarios that you play, Ultron. So I think these placements are about right. How you feeling about it?
Yeah, I feel good about this. Some of them it was hard not to get into the negative. It's really, really difficult. But, I've played all of these cards. I can safely say that. And I probably will again.
Can I make a bold prediction here as we start this? And we haven't recorded the other episodes, so this
Go
is a
for it.
prediction. I think I'm going to say that we will see a tier list that is roughly in line with the release schedule. I think you're going
Ooh.
to see, not always, not exclusively, but I think generally you're going to see newer cards are going to be towards the top of this list. And I wouldn't be surprised to see these moving down and kind of filter out that way. Maybe I'm wrong. I think this is really fun. I'm really excited to look at some of these cards because negative criticism is easy. It's easy to make fun of cards and laugh at ones you don't play. But I think it's harder to look at them and really try to evaluate them positively. And that's kind of where the idea of this whole series came in, right? We want to take these
Yeah.
cards that people don't talk about, people don't mostly play, let's be honest, and be able to say something nice about them. So everything has a redeeming quality.
Everything does. Even ground stomp does see play, whether it's a specific scenario or a niche situation. It can be good, and you can be like, "That was pretty good ground stomp." And I think that says a lot about the game. There are certain old characters, certain choices on design that I'm sure the designers maybe wouldn't make now, but the designs are so strong. There's always a situation. There's always some kind of silver lining to everything.
I agree, and I'm excited for the next episode where we're talking about the next wave of heroes. I think there's some good cards in there too.
Yeah, wave one will be really interesting to talk about. So that'll be next time. So if you're watching this, I'd like to say thank you for being here, first of all, and thank you to Boomguy for being here. This has been really, really fun. I think this is the first collaboration I've ever had on my channel outside of, the podcast, but, a real YouTube video. So this has been really fun.
Yeah, same. I've had a great time, and I look forward to doing more.
Yeah. So we'll see you guys in the next one.